The Invincible War was one of the biggest events of Season 2, right behind Conquest arriving, though if I'm going to be honest with you, I'd argue that the Invincible War might have actually had more of an impact on people, especially meme culture, considering how many Invincible War type memes ended up popping off with different series, leading to several more Invincible variants being made, and one of the most popular ones is of course GDA Mark. Now, if I'm being honest, I don't know where this idea started from, but if some of you guys do know where the idea started from, because I spent a while searching this up, please link in the comment section down below. I'm going to link a bunch of people where this idea originated from, but I sadly don't know the exact source, so I can't give them a shout out like I want to. This is a variant of Mark where Omni-Man started his plans early, he ended up killing Debbie, but as a result of that, he felt an immense amount of guilt and left the planet, leaving an incredibly young Mark to be raised by Cecil Stedman as the ultimate warrior of the GDA, which is the most common variation of this story, and I want to explore that story in depth today, with some of my own little spins on it too. After all, I don't want to just be a copy and paste of a bunch of the stories. So welcome to What If Mark Was Raised by the GDA. Our story starts with a regretful Omni-Man looking at what he had just done. He knew he needed to take over the planet, and his son had shown no signs of awakening their powers. Right now, he was the strongest hero on the planet, so he knew he'd have the best chance at doing it right now. The first thing he needed to do, though, was eliminate his one biggest weakness. The one thing that was changing his very soul. His wife, Debbie. The only thing that he actually cared about on this planet aside from his son, Mark. Which led to him eliminating Debbie. However, even though he managed to succeed in doing it with relative ease, he felt such amounts of emotions, such turmoil. He didn't know why he was feeling this way. After all, he shouldn't be feeling anything towards Debbie whatsoever, but yet he still was. And he was holding on his communicator for a second, debating if he should call the Guardians, doing that in order to try and eliminate them all at the same time. But right now, he just couldn't bring himself to do it, as someone else began to come downstairs, his 6-year-old son, Mark Grayson. But when he came downstairs, he saw something that completely shook him to his core. His dead mom with his father standing there. As tears began to come down Mark's face, he had first thought that maybe somebody had broken into their house. After all, their father was a superhero. There was no way they could have done this. However, before Mark could even approach him, suddenly Omni-Man took off, flying through the roof and flying into the sky, before flying out of the planet's atmosphere, never to be seen again. Leaving Mark stunned, confused, and scared. He was alone. He was alone in his own house. And by the time he started to realize it was already far too late. However, suddenly several people began to appear inside. GDA agents all struck in their black and green armor, as well as Cecil Stedman himself. And Cecil, seeing the clearly traumatized kid, he decided to approach him, trying to be as warm as he could. As he told him they worked with superheroes, they weren't here to hurt him, but right now they should go to a more secure place. That was when Mark had a sudden outburst. And in that outburst, he ended up awakening his powers, destroying the very floor they were standing on. He blamed himself. He blamed himself for not being able to awaken his powers earlier, because if he did, he would have been able to save his mom. But more than that, he questioned why. Why did his father leave? And despite all the tragedy, this is the first sign of something for Cecil. Despite Mark being so young, he had awakened his powers. And if he was this young right now and could already do stuff like this, imagine his potential. He was the son of Omni-Man after all, and Omni-Man was their strongest hero on the planet by far. Which led to Cecil approaching Mark again, as he told him, "How about I give you a chance to make sure this doesn't happen again? You don't really have anywhere else to go anymore, Mark. So, come with me, and we can make sure that families won't have to die like this ever again. And I'll make sure you'll be able to avenge your mom." The young, grief-stricken boy decided to agree. He needed that revenge. He needed to avenge his mother for what had happened. Leading to Cecil Stedman becoming the official and legal guardian of Mark Grayson, as now his training began in order to become a strong enough superhero to avenge his mother's death. And Mark's childhood quickly became a non-standard one. After all, he was rather eager to train. Of course, Cecil knew better than have him start fighting on the field immediately. He was still only 6 years old. But training on top of an education, that was something the GDA could definitely provide. The GDA was also rather quick to tell the Guardians of the Globe what happened with Omni-Man. How Omni-Man wasn't their ally anymore. That Omni-Man killed Debbie. But his son Mark Grayson was still alive and now being trained by the GDA, so he had an important request from the Guardians, to help train Mark Grayson when the time comes in order to make sure he is prepared to be able to help fight to protect the planet. And the Guardians were pretty unsure about this. After all, they had just learned that Omni-Man was a traitor and that he left his son behind. However, the Immortal was the first to speak, as he told them that they couldn't really blame a kid for the sins of the father. Besides, this was the perfect chance to rectify it. Mark Grayson was still a human, so for all they knew, he could have ended up better. It would be their job to make sure he did. And the other Guardians agreed to that as well. This was still a kid at the end of the day, and their jobs as heroes was to guide the next generation, to make sure the next generation of Earthlings would be prepared for anything. And Mark was still a born Earthling. Even if his father was an alien, he was still from Earth. So they were going to make sure to help him as best as they could. Mark's training was rather eventful. During his time training, he ended up training with the Immortal in order to control his powers. After all, the Immortal was the closest thing he could have to a Viltrumite. He had spent his time between training with several heroes, several martial artists in order to learn his skills and how to control his powers better, and finally using whatever GDA tech they could possibly find in order to make him stronger for training. On top of that, they also created a superhero suit for him, using both a mix of GDA technology as well as technology from Darkwing to make the suit as strong as possible, leading to Mark picking a black and green type suit. After all, he took inspiration from the several GDA armors that he had seen across his lifetime. It was one that stuck out to him, even picking a helmet similar to the armor of the GDA soldiers. During his time there, he also ended up making friends with one of the people who worked with the GDA, a similar orphan to himself, a boy known as Rex. One of the people there who truly treated Mark like an actual person, not a child that needed to be trained, not a potential weapon, but a true friend. Even though he was a little bit of an asshole. But through this training, Mark had managed to become incredibly strong, all with one goal on his mind. With the goal of being able to surpass Omni-Man and eventually be able to kill him and avenge his mom. Something that he never forgot, but he also had a secondary goal, one that Cecil was sure to raise him with, which was the protection of Earth no matter what. Mark Grayson had now become Earth's greatest weapon. 11 years had passed until we finally arrive at the start of the timeline, with the Mauler twins attacking the White House. And this didn't just end up going smoothly for the heroes, but ended up going even smoother than normal. After all, this was the debut of a brand new hero. Though he didn't give himself a name, he just got to business, assisting in the defeat against the Mauler twins, having near perfect synergy with the Guardians. Before the press could arrive in order to try and interrogate or talk to this brand new hero, Mark put both of his hands onto both of the Mauler twins, and in a green glow all three of them disappeared, teleporting all three of them back to GDA prison. While Mark Grayson wanted to be Earth's protector, he didn't really care that much for the press. He wanted to be the planet's shield, and he saw no purpose in announcing himself like that. He didn't really care what he was called. Also, if he was being honest, it was partially because he didn't really have an idea on what to even call himself. He had been so focused on trying to protect the world that he kind of forgot about that part, but he decided he would just take whatever name is the most common one the world decided to give him. And as he watched the Mauler twins being taken away, he couldn't help but wonder what would happen if those guys turned good. After all, they did have some potential. His thought process was a lot more like Cecil, trying to see what people could be turned into weapons, what evil villains could be turned good for the sake of protecting the planet. And he brought this idea up to Cecil, who Cecil told him that while he did want to do that, he wasn't too sure how he could potentially recruit them yet. He did want to find a way, since the Mauler twins were geniuses on another level. Geniuses who had managed to crack the code on cloning, so if they could figure it out and figure out a way to replicate that, it would be amazing. But they tried their best to no success, so the best way would be recruiting them, but turning them good was going to be a lot harder. Still, Cecil was determined to figure out a way to do so as well. That would be invaluable technology to have on their side. But that left Mark to return back to his training. By this point, Mark had already begun to outpace several of the biggest weights that they could find on the planet and even make. There was nothing left on the planet they could really use to push his lifting strength. He was also reaching a similar point in training by this point for when it came to his physical combat. They had some kaiju that they used for Mark for sparring against, as well as the Immortal from time to time, but they were starting to become rather useless to him. We're even inventing a power suit for the Immortal to utilize in order to try and stand a good chance against Mark to push him was starting to have diminishing returns. Fortunately, at least when it came to lifting weight, there was a fix, and that person was Adam Eve, a superhero that they were coming to know, who was around the same age as Mark. She had the capability to create anything so long as she had enough food consumed in her, as well as the ability to manipulate matter, so she had been a lot of help for this. But this also led to Mark and Eve getting to know each other, and Eve talking to him about how he should probably try and go for a normal life at some point, which that slightly confused Mark about why she was bringing that up. As she told him that he didn't look happy just only being a hero, only like he was just getting it done for the sake of getting it done. Well, he didn't really have much of a childhood anyways, considering everything that happened. After all, by this point the hero community was more than aware of what had happened to Debbie, which even led to her recommending that Mark ended up joining them in high school. Sure, Mark was already more than smart enough to be able to graduate and go to any college. He got the best education the GDA could offer. But it wasn't about education, it was about having a normal life. And Mark honestly considered this for a couple of moments. He was really considering if he should do this. He had been so dedicated to being a hero and protector for the planet properly, that a part of him wondered that maybe he should enjoy some time as Mark Grayson. So he decided to bring this up with Cecil. After all, he felt if anyone would know the answer to this, it would be Cecil. Though Cecil's answer actually ended up shocking him, which his answer was yes. As he told Mark that he believed that he was more than just a weapon. He believed he was an actual person, and the best part about being a hero was their humanity. He didn't want Mark just to be a gun that could be pointed at a problem. He wanted Mark to actually be a person and hero. Though this was also for another reason. He knew that having people he could care for, he knew that having people around him to humanize him would make him a lot stronger as a weapon. Something that was humanity's greatest weapon and gift was having people they could care for and want to protect. And an emotionless, uncaring machine would not have that. Not to mention the fact that Mark by this point was the strongest hero on Earth by far. Cecil believed that by this point he was about the same level as Omni-Man. Maybe he was even stronger, but he wasn't too sure about that yet. But he couldn't help but wonder how this was going to go. So Cecil sent that order off to some of his guys in order to prepare some paperwork for Mark to be able to transfer to the same high school as Adam Eve. That way they could have at least one friend. However, while that was happening, suddenly they all got an alert. A massive amount of aliens were invading the planet, a group from an entirely different dimension, that being the Flaxans. And Mark Grayson was the first on the scene, teleporting there immediately. As the aliens were attempting to fire lasers on civilians, but before it could hit any of them, they were suddenly all moved out of the way in super speed. And when the Flaxans looked, they would see someone standing in front of them, a man armored in some high technological armor. As the man then spoke and said, "This will be your final chance. You either can leave now or you will die. We can negotiate and come to a peaceful resolution for why ever you're here, but if you choose to stay here and fight, then each and every one of you will die." Now, Mark Grayson doubted this was actually going to work, but he was still a hero at the end of the day, and he wanted to at least try his best to see if he could resolve this peacefully. But as he expected, each of the Flaxans pointed their guns towards him and fired immediately. Maybe it was because they couldn't understand him, or maybe they were just that violent, but either way, the result was going to be the same. They were clearly not here for peace, and considering they came here and immediately started firing and attacking, peace was not an option. Though to his surprise as he was starting to dodge the blast, one of them did actually manage to hit him and stagger him. Now it didn't do any damage to him, but the fact that it could stagger him at all was rather impressive. Mentally noting that down, as he was going to make sure to be as careful as possible to not destroy any of their tech. After all, if that could be rebuilt for Earth, who knows what that could do. But Mark Grayson released a sigh as he said, "Well, you guys asked for this." And in a quick burst of speed, several parts of the army were completely dismantled. Hundreds of Flaxans all at once were completely torn through without mercy. The only thing that was merciful about this was that each of Mark's moves were precise, made to kill someone on the spot. They seemed to have similar enough biology to humans considering their shape, so he figured this might end up being able to kill them instantly as well. Mark didn't really enjoy killing if he was being honest, but he made sure to learn how to be able to kill as fast as possible so that the people he was killing wouldn't have to feel that pain. That was the best he could offer them as the hero and protector of Earth. As he blitzed over to another group of soldiers, blitzing again to another, he was dismantling them with the efficiency of a Viltrumite, yet at the same time the care and mercy as a human. And it didn't take long for the Flaxans to realize they had no chance against this whatsoever. Maybe if they went back and started to advance their tech they could do this again, so they needed to retreat for now, as they all started to run backwards, starting to head right back into their portal. Seeing they're now starting to run away, Mark was a little bit more optimistic, but at the same time he was going to be cautious about this. He didn't chase after any of the Flaxans that chose to leave, allowing them to escape. As now littered across the battlefield were several Flaxan bodies, as well as some of their tanks that were destroyed, or at least partially destroyed. A lot of Flaxan technology was left there in order to be analyzed by the GDA, as several soldiers from the GDA teleported in alongside the Teen Team, and when the Teen Team arrived, Invincible recognized Adam Eve, as well as Rex Splode. After all, he had met both of them already, though he was curious about the other ones. They were all rather surprised to see though that Mark had this handled. Earth's strongest hero really was something else. That was when the Immortal decided to approach Invincible. Besides Cecil, Immortal had taken on the other role of being Invincible's parent, though he was a lot more like an uncle and mentor figure rather than an actual parent like how Cecil was. But Immortal told Invincible to take the rest of the day off. After all, he definitely earned it. The Guardians could handle it from here. And Mark gave them a thumbs up. He was going to do that. After all, he did want to get to know the high school he'd be going to soon a little bit better, so he teleported back to GDA headquarters and changed into a more normal-like outfit. During Mark's time there exploring the school, he ended up meeting with another student. Or well, more so another student ended up approaching him. This student, of course, was William. After all, I did find Mark rather interesting. There was something off about Mark. He felt almost a little bit distant while he was here. So that naturally made him curious about him, and he decided to approach him and talk with him for a bit. And they started to get to know each other better, which showed Mark he was going to have at least more than one friend other than Adam Eve. Though I wouldn't call him his best friend or something crazy like that, no. They were just a random person that they knew right now. However, Mark did have a good feeling that he was going to like this place. Eventually, he did return back to GDA to get back into his training. After all, his mind was laser focused on being able to defeat Omni-Man one day, as another day would pass. Where during the second day, the second attack of the Flaxans would begin. Where this time around, the Guardians of the Globe have a different plan in mind. They decided to follow after them. After all, they were able to deal with the Flaxans relatively easily, even though they did advance their tech a little bit more than they had to in canon since they were fighting against a stronger Invincible. It wasn't enough to deal with the Guardians of the Globe, which left the Earth a little bit weaker than normal defenses for a bit. Fortunately for them, they had an incredibly strong hero, one with the speed of Red Rush, the amazing combat skill of War Woman, and finally the endurance and tenacity of the Immortal. Quickly, Mark Grayson was also gaining quite a lot of fans. A lot of people have been wondering about what to call him, and a name had been spreading around. He was by far the strongest hero on the planet. Not to mention, they genuinely couldn't see anyone who could really beat him. So the name a lot of people were sticking to was After all, this guy really did seem invincible. He was able to deal with any of the threats that were coming his way with relative ease. And that was a name that Mark Grayson decided to keep. He didn't know why, but just some part of him felt like it was natural and just worked well with him. However, while this was going on, the GDA was also working on the new Flaxan tech that had been given to them, trying to work on remaking it, amplifying it, and adding it to their own soldiers, and potentially making a super amplified version to add to Mark's armor. After all, Mark's one big weakness right now was the fact that he didn't have range. So if they could potentially enhance Mark's range even further, then he would become an even greater hero than he already is. But during the time they were working on those upgrades, suddenly they saw something entering into their atmosphere, another alien. And they were worried at first that this might have been Omni-Man. After all, they hadn't seen Omni-Man in years. Over a decade by this point, though they were able to tell that he had orange skin as well as one eye, so there was no way this was Omni-Man unless he figured out some way to shapeshift, which led Invincible to flying off into space, preparing himself to battle against whatever could be. Though when he arrived, he couldn't see anything around him, making him a little bit confused, until he felt a fist slam against his back, pushing him a little bit forward, but not by much. But what was even more confusing was that he heard a voice in his head, telling him that he arrived earlier than expected, and he was digging the high-tech aesthetic to him. It served a lot better than that look without a mustache that he had. Like, that beard without a mustache aesthetic did not go well for him, and Invincible was able to immediately recognize that he was talking about Immortal. However, Invincible quickly closed the distance, grabbing onto both of Alan the alien's hands, with Invincible mentally saying, "Surrender, I do not want conflict with other aliens. I am not the one you previously fought. The one you were talking about is the Immortal. But I am the current guardian of this planet, and I will not allow a threat to Earth to stand." And hearing that caused some surprise to rise on Alan, as he said, wait, hold on, did you just say Earth? Oh my gosh, man, I am testing the wrong planet and I've been going to the wrong planet. I'm supposed to be testing Uraf, not Earth. This made a look of confusion rise on Invincible as he tilted his head a little bit and said, "What do you mean testing? And what do you mean you went to the wrong planet?" And Alan realized that these guys had no idea who he was or why he was even here. As Alan asked, "Do you have a place that we can sit down and talk? Like, I don't really want to be in space doing this because floating around and talking sucks." And Invincible nodded, especially considering he had someone else who he knew would want to hear about this even more than he did, Cecil. So the both of them flew back down into Earth, as Invincible contacted Cecil and told him that this alien seems to at least be somewhat non-hostile. He's not too sure yet, but they want to talk, so he's going to bring them to the GDA if that's fine, or if he has a better talking place in mind, he'll bring them there. Cecil sent him the location of one of the GDA bases, not the main one because they didn't really know if they could trust him yet or not, but at least one of them. And once they landed, several GDA agents had their guns trained and ready to fire on Alan in case he did try and fight back, though at the same time they knew they wouldn't be of that much help. Still, if they could be any support at all to Invincible, it would be good. He was going to be the main hero ready to fight against him. Though Invincible was pretty confident in himself. He was kind of significantly stronger than Alan the alien right now. After all, Alan wasn't able to break out from his hold, which led to Cecil teleporting in and them beginning their talk. As Cecil said, "So you're here to check if a planet is ready to defend itself, but what are you checking if they can defend themselves from?" "I'm the head of the planet's defenses, so I need to make sure I know what threats might be coming my way." Leading to Alan responding, "Oh, you know, aliens, monsters, Viltrumites mainly, that's our main threat." And it was almost like a light went off in Invincible's head as he leaned a bit closer. Now it was his time to speak, as he asked him, "Why are Viltrumites a threat?" After all, he knew what a Viltrumite was. Omni-Man was a Viltrumite. But he knew nothing about what Viltrumites actually were. Sure, yes, Omni-Man had told him a story, but with what he had seen so long ago, he had no idea if he could really believe it or not. He had no idea if he could truly believe if Omni-Man was just a bad Viltrumite and the rest of them were good, or if all of them were bad. Unfortunately, he found out it was the latter. As Alan told him about what the Viltrumites truly were, they were planet conquerors. They destroyed planets in a claim to make it better, but mainly for their resources. An empire that wants to take over the galaxy and universe, and so far the Viltrumites are by far and away the most dangerous and powerful threat to the entire universe. With him making a comment that they strangely look a lot more like humans. And that was when Mark took over, as he decided to do something that he wasn't too sure if this was the smartest move or not, but at the same time, he felt this was necessary. As he explained to Alan, the alien, that he was a half Viltrumite. He wasn't on Omni-Man's side though. No, he was going to protect the Earth from any and all Viltrumites. His father was a Viltrumite who had killed his mother, and then they went rogue and left the Earth. He had no idea where they went. But if this Viltrumite empire was what caused all of this to happen, what caused the death of his mother, then he was going to be certain of one thing. No matter what, Earth would prepare themselves to take on the Viltrumite empire. No matter what they bring. And this was all rather shocking news for Alan. After all, he could tell that Mark was definitely a good person, but more importantly, what was even more shocking was the fact that Viltrumite, a full-blooded one, raised in the Empire, chose to leave. They chose to leave their station. Sure, it was already a big shock that a half Viltrumite was rebelling against the Empire, but that could be explained by just simply being raised on Earth. But another person broke away from Viltrumite programming. But Alan told the both of them he needs to report this back to the Coalition of Planets, and he'd meet up with them later. This conversation was most certainly not over yet. And with that, Alan the alien took off, as Invincible and Cecil looked towards each other and nodded. They now knew what they were really up against. And while Invincible was most definitely strong, he knew he was going to need to get stronger, much stronger than he was before. He was right now the Earth's only defender. The Immortal was the Earth's second strongest defender, and even then he didn't know if the Immortal would be enough. So they were going to need to see whatever they could find in order to keep getting strong enough to take this stuff on. Leading to Cecil developing a brand new project, Project Anti-Viltrumite.